Do it for the exposure. Most independent artists have heard that at some point. Perform for free. It's exposure. Feature on this. It's exposure. Post constantly. It's exposure. Exposure is framed like opportunity. Like visibility automatically turns into momentum. Like attention automatically turns into income. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Exposure by itself doesn't pay. It doesn't guarantee support. It doesn't guarantee loyalty. And it definitely doesn't guarantee stability. What exposure actually gives you is awareness. Awareness is passive. Support is intentional. And most artists confuse the two. They accept unpaid opportunities thinking the visibility will eventually translate into something real. They invest time and energy into being seen without asking what happens after. No clear next step, no structure, no plan for conversion. So the exposure fades. People watch. People scroll. People move on. And the artist is left wondering why the opportunity didn't turn into anything. Exposure feels valuable because it's public. It looks impressive. It feels productive. It creates the illusion of growth. But without clarity and structure behind it, exposure becomes noise. This episode isn't about avoiding visibility. It's about understanding when exposure is useful and when it's just a distraction dressed up as opportunity. Because once you understand that difference, you stop saying yes to everything and you start moving intentionally. Exposure isn't inherently bad, but it's rarely neutral, and it almost never benefits both sides equally. When someone offers you exposure instead of payment, you have to ask a simple question. Who is actually gaining leverage here? In most cases, the platform, event, or person offering exposure already has something you don't: attention. They're not trading from equal ground. They're trading attention for your labor, your creativity, your time, or your audience. That exchange only makes sense if there's a clear path forward for you. But most exposure deals stop at visibility. There's no system behind it, no follow-up strategy, no conversion plan, no way to capture or deepen the attention. So the value flows one direction. They grow their content, they grow their platform, they strengthen their brand. And you walk away with screenshots. The exposure myth survives because artists equate being seen with being advanced. But visibility without structure is temporary. It creates a spike, not momentum. And spikes without systems collapse quickly. If someone benefits from your appearance, performance, or content, there should be clarity around how you benefit too. Not hypothetically, not maybe later, but intentionally. Exposure becomes powerful only when it connects to something you control. A mailing list, a product, a direct offer, a long-term relationship. Without that, exposure is just awareness borrowed from someone else's platform. And borrowed attention disappears as quickly as it arrives. Understanding who truly benefits from exposure changes how you say yes. It shifts you from reactive to strategic. And that shift protects your energy and your future income. Exposure becomes exploitation when the exchange is one-sided, and everyone pretends it isn't. It happens when artists are told they should be grateful just to be included, grateful to perform, grateful to collaborate, grateful to contribute, even when their work creates real value for someone else. The line between opportunity and exploitation gets blurry when artists undervalue their own contribution. If your performance draws attention, that has value. If your music fills a venue, that has value. If your content helps someone else grow, that has value. But exploitation begins when that value isn't acknowledged or compensated in any meaningful way. Sometimes it's framed as paying your dues. Sometimes it's framed as this is how the industry works. Sometimes it's framed as it'll be good for your resume. But exposure doesn't pay bills. Experience doesn't replace income. And resume lines don't create sustainability. The most dangerous part is that exploitation often feels normal. Artists accept unpaid work because they fear missing out. They say yes because they don't want to seem difficult. They agree because they believe opportunity is scarce. But opportunity built on imbalance usually stays imbalanced. When you consistently give value without structure or return, you train people to expect it for free. That's not empowerment. That's erosion. This doesn't mean you should never collaborate or do unpaid appearances. It means you should understand the exchange clearly. What are you gaining? What are you building? What do you control afterward? If the answer is vague, the opportunity probably is too. Exposure becomes exploitation when artists sacrifice long-term leverage for short-term visibility, and that trade rarely works out in their favor. Exposure isn't the problem. The problem is when exposure becomes the goal instead of the tool. Exposure should never be the reward. It should be the entry point. When used correctly, exposure introduces people to your work. It creates awareness. It opens a door. But doors only matter if there's something behind them. Exposure is useful when it connects to structure. If someone discovers you, what happens next? Do they know where to go? Do they understand what you offer? Is there a clear way to support you beyond listening? Without that, exposure becomes a temporary spotlight, and spotlights move quickly. The right way to think about exposure is leverage. If you're performing for free, are you capturing emails? If you're collaborating, are you strengthening a relationship? If you're featured somewhere, are you directing that attention somewhere you control? Exposure should feed something that belongs to you. Your audience, your platform, your offer, your system. If it doesn't, you're building on borrowed ground. And borrowed ground never creates stability. There are moments when exposure makes sense, especially early on, but only when it supports direction, when it fits into a larger plan, when it builds towards sustainability instead of just visibility. Exposure without intention drains energy. Exposure with structure builds momentum. The difference is clarity. If you can't explain how the exposure strengthens your foundation, it probably doesn't. And once you start evaluating opportunities that way, you stop chasing attention. You start building leverage. And leverage is what eventually creates income. There were moments when I said yes to opportunities simply because they felt like progress. If more people were going to see me, I assumed that meant I was moving forward. I performed without pay. I collaborated without structure. I invested time into platforms I didn't control. And I told myself it would make sense later. Sometimes it felt good in the moment. More eyes, more reactions, more recognition. But when everything was over, not much had actually changed. No stronger foundation, no clearer direction, no meaningful income. What I realized later was that I was mistaking motion for leverage. I was busy. I was visible. But I wasn't building anything sustainable. The exposure didn't connect to a system. It didn't direct people anywhere specific. It didn't strengthen ownership. It didn't create repeatable support. It just passed through. And that's the part nobody prepares you for. The applause fades. The post gets buried. The opportunity moves on to someone else. If there's no structure behind the visibility, the impact disappears with it. Once I started thinking differently, my decisions changed. I stopped asking, will this get me seen? And started asking, what does this build? Does this strengthen my platform? Does this deepen connection? Does this support long-term control? If the answer wasn't clear, I paused. Not because I became cynical, but because I understood that energy is limited, and independence requires intention. Exposure isn't dangerous. Unexamined exposure is. And learning that distinction changed how I move. If Independent Artist Game is helping you think differently about the money side of being independent, the simplest way to support the movement is to like this video, share it with another artist, and subscribe. These conversations aren't about hype. They're about clarity. And clarity spreads when people pass it along. And if you want to support directly, you can grab merch at southentmusic.com. Everything there helps keep this series independent, consistent, and focused on real conversations about ownership, leverage, and sustainability. Now let's close this out. Exposure isn't currency. It's a spotlight. And spotlights move. Independent artists who build something sustainable eventually understand this. Visibility is temporary. Leverage is lasting. Exposure by itself doesn't create income. It creates awareness. What you do with that awareness determines whether it fades or compounds. If there's no structure behind the visibility, nothing changes. People see you, They react, they move on. But when exposure connects to something you control, your platform, your offer, your relationship with your audience, it becomes useful. The mistake most artists make is chasing attention without asking what it builds. They measure success by how many people looked. They don't measure it by how many people stayed. They say yes to opportunities that look impressive but don't strengthen their foundation. And over time, that drains energy. Exposure feels productive. Structure feels slower. But structure is what pays. Independent artists who last learn to evaluate opportunities differently. Instead of asking, will this get me seen? They ask, will this build leverage? Will this strengthen my audience? Will this move people closer to supporting? Will this create something repeatable? If the answer is unclear, the opportunity probably is too. Exposure isn't evil. It just isn't a business model. And when you stop treating it like one, your decisions become sharper. You protect your time. You value your work properly. You build intentionally instead of reactively. That's when independence starts to feel controlled instead of chaotic. That's the difference. That's the discipline. That's the game.